Okay, welcome back to Sci-Fi Scarborough Online Year 2. We are now incredibly lucky to be speaking to the one and only Mr. Andrew Robinson, who played Garak in Deep Space Nine for 37 episodes back in the 90s. Probably the best Star Trek character ever written, and certainly the best one in Deep Space Nine. So much was going on with that character, always fun to watch. So a real pleasure to have Andrew here with us today. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. Welcome to Scarborough.
My pleasure. And I think it was 39 episodes, Chris, but
39, sorry.
who's counting?
It felt like you were in a lot more, to be fair.
No,
Such a big presence of the character.
Yeah, I know. It felt that way to me too, actually.
So can I ask, first of all, before we talk about Star Trek, why acting? What got you into this profession? What was it that led you down that path?
Well, I think probably the deciding factor was when I got a Fulbright scholarship to study acting in London at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, Lambda.
Yeah.
Once I got that, I mean, because I never could have afforded to come over here and study on my own at that time, and it was a life-changing experience for me. So that was it.
Wow, I didn't really just study actually in our country over here. I mean, Lambda's obviously a massive institution, really, really big.
Well, it was. It still is. It still is. I think a really good place. When I was there, it was brilliant. I mean, it was. I mean, the people who were teaching there, and I mean, it was a great school.
So, how many years were you actually over here for then?
I was just over there for 1 year.
It's 1 year.
Yeah, but it made all the difference. It really did.
And when you then got into, we've only got so much time, so I'm really going to go straight to Deep Space Nine. When you got Deep Space Nine, were there big plans for this character, or was it you've got a one-off? There's this character called Garak, and then it snowballed when people loved it, or did they always know they were going to put a big arc in there and build him up and up and up as he went along?
Well, I think it was a one-off to begin with, and I think the motivating reason for the writers to create Garak was that they were looking for a storyline to involve Julian Bashir.
Yeah.
And because at that point they didn't have a storyline for him, and he being one of the regulars, they needed one. So they thought they'll create this, this character who's an older spy.
Sure.
Living on the station inexplicably. He's kind of like, a member of the SS living in Jerusalem after World War II or something. Bizarre situation, and see if there was any chemistry between myself and Sadig. And Sadig and I, of course, we got on famously. So, I mean, then it was just a question. If I was the right actor to play with Sadig, then there would be a storyline.
Lovely. So when you read that first script, what were your first impressions of it when you saw the sort of dialogue that you had? Because I think it's beautifully written, the way that Garak speaks.
It is beautifully written, but I couldn't get over the fact that I had no idea what a Cardassian is.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's the first time in my life, and I've had a lot of scripts, come across my desk or whatever, and always it's like, okay, this is a cowboy, this is a doctor, they're all been human beings, and then suddenly there's this Cardassian, and I got no help at all from anybody who would tell me what a Cardassian is.
Okay.
And at the time, I think there were just a few appearances in Next Generation from Mark Alimo and David Warner. Those are the only two I can think of, before Garak. There are probably more. So it was a question of like, how do I invent this? It was, but it was so well written. I mean, which is your original point. It was so beautifully written that all I had to do was just sort of like make a choice of how I'm going to attack the scene, and the scene carried me.
Yeah, it really did feel though in that very first episode, the way in which you portrayed the character, that it was completely formed. There didn't seem to be any sort of like, oh, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. It felt absolutely natural, like it should have been for that role, which is why I think people fell in love with him so soon. as a character on the show. It was amazingly, that very first scene, well delivered. I thought, I just love it. I really
You
do.
know, you sometimes get lucky, Chris. As an actor, you sometimes get a role. I've had a handful of roles like that. I've been very fortunate to get a handful of roles like that in my career, where you just start speaking the words, and they make sense.
Yeah.
They and they fit you. It's and it's inexplicable. I don't know how to explain this, but it's just the right fit.
Yeah. I also know, I mean, obviously you've been asked this a million times, and about the prosthetics you had to wear. What amazes me is just how much expression you were able to do with Garak, with your eyes and your mouth and so, with all this makeup and stuff all over your head, basically. How difficult was that to actually deliver in that way? Because it really doesn't feel like it feels so real. I was amazed by it.
See, the thing with mask work, and this is one of the reasons why DS9, I think it was such a great show, because the actors who were behind the masks, like Armin or Renee, you know, we were all trained actors, and we all did mask work. You know, the famous mask work in drama school. But you learn that basically, I mean, well, for one thing, technically, the mask was not a stiff mask. They were brilliant. They're very light latex, so your face could still move, but still, as in all mask work, it's in the eyes.
Yeah.
It all happens in the eyes, and when you watching someone working in a mask, you go to their eyes, and we do that naturally with, you know, in everyday discourse with other people, but because there is this thing on our face, or on another person's face, you go to their eyes. You're more conscious that you're getting information from their eyes.
Sure. So obviously, I mean, like you said, you were put there with Dr. Bashir because it was about getting the storyline, and you had so many episodes with him. I mean, it really felt like you were a double act on the show.
Right.
Who else did you enjoy working with a lot? Because obviously, you had times like with Renee when you did the ones where you were torturing her and so on.
No, I love those.
Edry Dax and so on. Which ones did you enjoy?
Well, I enjoyed them all, and I mean that because I loved working with that group of people because they were serious actors. It was like, it's acting is it's fun for me. I love doing it, but when I'm doing it, it's serious business, you know, because you're out there and people are paying money to watch you, and you have to come up with something that's worthwhile watching. But working with these other actors, I loved working with Renee. He was a wonderful actor, wonderful man. I loved working with Avery. I mean, that one episode of By Pale Moonlight is
my favorite episode of all time. That one, love it.
Well, it's a great episode. I understand why it would be a favorite because it's one of my favorite things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
And it was working with a man of that, you know, with Avery's weight and intensity and his passion and his commitment to it. But all the actors, Armin, I mean, you know, the Nana, I mean, they're all giving people, and we were aware that we were kind of a repertory company. So, you know, it didn't make any difference who you were working with. You know, there was if there were any problems personality wise, which there really weren't, that was all pushed aside for the work.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So do you still, I mean, obviously with conventions when they happen again because of COVID and so on, but do you still see other cast members outside of convention time? Are you still good friends with them after all these years, and we're 25 years later? Or is it a case where we meet up as like one big family when it comes to the Star Trek con time?
Oh, it's that's one of the things I love about doing conventions is I see these people I haven't seen in a long time, you know, and not only from our show, but when it's a big convention, you've got all various shows, and you see old friends, you see people that you haven't worked with, in God knows when,
Yeah.
especially when you're as old as I am. So it's just such a pleasure. It really is.
Have you?
Also, I enjoy conventions because the thing about Star Trek that was revelatory to me, Chris, is that it's the first time in my life I got a chance to meet the people who support me, the
Yes.
people
Yeah.
who watch me, the people who've supported my work throughout my career, and that was that's a gift. It really is a
Yeah.
gift, and it's there's an exchange because I deeply appreciate an audience.
Of course.
Without an audience, I don't have a career. And clearly there's a certain part of the audience that regards my work well enough to be called a fan, in which I humbly accept and I'm grateful for.
Well, as I said, I mean, Garak is my favorite character. That is not a lie for all the Star Treks. I loved it, but my colleague Steve, who runs Sci-Fi Scarborough, he's one of the four of us that run it. He was also like, "You've got literally the best character in the whole of the show," because I love the fact that Garak, 1 minute, he is a very sort of happy, kind, lovely gentleman. Then he's a very sadistic sort of person. Then he's a very sly person. Then you don't know if he's lying or telling the truth. And I thought, if I'd been another actor on that show, I'd have been jealous of your lines because you had so many wonderful ways of playing that character because of what they wrote for you. I mean,
Oh,
I just,
the writers loved writing those, those one-line quips for me. And of course I love that because they were great to deliver. But and all that you're saying about Garrick is true. They're all those dimensions of the character, which is what happens when you're playing a character that's basically a liar
yeah.
and who's withholding the truth and who has secrets. And that's, for an actor, that's the most fun. It's much more fun to play, for me anyway,
Oh,
to play a character like that than playing someone who's, his heart is on his sleeve.
no, I loved the way he performed it. I loved the way it was written. It was just great. I mean, now we've already said about the Pale Moonlight, which was probably the best episode I think they ever did in that show. But do you have any others that really stood out for you in your time? I mean, I loved Armand Bashir. The holodeck James Bond was just great fun to watch.
All that. Well, all my stuff with Siddig, that was like, falling off a log. I mean, it was just like two old friends getting together, having this bizarre conversation, and it was easy. And the scenes I always enjoyed watching those scenes because they looked so good, uh, simply because of the ease in which we played. My favorite episode that I did was The Wire, and it's because it was a serious piece about addiction,
Yeah, that was
which
great. Well,
there's been addiction in my family, and addiction is like certainly an issue in a lot of families. And it was so beautiful. Robert Hewitt Wolf wrote it. It was so beautifully written, and for me, it's one of the best pieces of work I have ever done in my life.
it was an amazing episode.
And it's like, and which story is true,
Yeah,
all of them, especially the
I know
lie.
that it was again great lines. Just those great lines on
Yeah, I mean,
top was great.
but I loved, you mentioned earlier about that two-parter that I did with Renee,
Mhm.
which was a lot of fun. I mean, and working with Renee, again, working with a master, working with someone, it was like, it was like playing great music together. Yeah, I'm the only ones the only ones I didn't like were the alternate universe ones,
All
because
right. Okay.
then I'm playing a Garak that had no subtext.
Yeah.
He was just
Absolutely.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
this mean son of a bitch, and I've played a lot of mean sons of bitches in my life, so I that didn't, but it was fine. I mean, the check cleared the bank and nobody died.
Right. We've already taken up quite a bit of your time, so I am going to leave it there. But I really am so grateful for you giving it this time, especially with only like a day or so notice when the leader got in touch and said, "Go on, go do something for Sci-Fi Scarborough," which is lovely, and I'm sure everyone's going to absolutely love it over here.
Great.
Would you like any parting words for the fans at Sci-Fi Scarborough?
No, I'm hoping that well, we're coming to England in June, and I'm hoping that maybe I'll even make an appearance at the London Comic-Con in at the end of July. But we'll see, you know. But I'm just stay safe in these wicked times.
It's lovely. And this is Andrew Robinson, who used to play Garak in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Thank you very much for your time.
Sure.